So we're going to talk for a minute about water, the big picture in California. That's this part of this module. We only got a few slides here that I want to go over rather quickly. Remember that California is the third largest state by land mass in the United States, and it also has the most population. That population is expected to grow to 50 million by 2050. But 30 million of us live below the Tehachapi Mountains. And I'm going to show you those mountains. They're right along here. Okay, so the majority of us live here, but all the water is there. Okay, so that's pretty important. If we were our own country, we would be the fifth or sixth largest country economically in the world. That's because our sub-economy, just the California economy, is literally $3 trillion a year. That's quite a power force, and that comes from Silicon Valley, from Hollywood, from agriculture, from tourism. It comes from a wide variety of areas and very diverse industries. That's kind of what keeps our economy pretty healthy, even when there are economic troubles. Then I'm not going to go over the physical things too much because we've already done that. But do remember that the southern section of our state, the bottom 1/3, is arid. It's really semi-arid, and it's a Mediterranean climate. To give you an example of what that means, the only other place that there's a significant amount of Mediterranean climate is around the Mediterranean. That means that we have relatively cool, dry summers with relatively warm, wet winters. And it makes for a unique climate. We have a lot of days of sunshine, a long growing season, and right now it seems really hot, and it is. But the rest of the United States and most of the world is suffering from high humidity combined with heat. They're still getting rain. They're having flooding issues, and we're just not here. That's why people typically live in Southern California. Even with all of that, most water is locally controlled by your own local government or your own local district. Okay, so that's really important to remember. Your water supply portfolio can be very different from your next door neighbor. And we import water from other places to supplement what we don't have in Southern California, whether that's from Northern and Central California or from the Colorado River watershed or from the Owens River Valley. So we import water as much as we can. Now, you remember when I showed you the different federal agencies that were involved when we were talking about United States water, okay? This is California water agencies. And you'll recognize that many of them are just Californian counterparts. For example, California Marine Fisheries, California EPA, California Fish and Game, California Emergency Management Agency, which we call CalEMA. But we have some of our own unique ones, right? So we have the water boards, and the State Water Resources Control Board is part of that. We also have the Department of Water Resources. They manage the State Water Project. The State Water Resources Control Board manages Department of Public Health. They do all of the certifications. And then to manage our investor-owned utilities or private utilities, there's the Public Utilities Commission. And theoretically, rates can't be raised unless a water agency, a private water agency, takes a case to the board. So how variable is water supply? Precipitation. This is the precipitation map for California, and the variability is ridiculous. It goes from over 100 inches in the very tip top where you see a red star in Gasquet to in the Mojave at Furnace Creek, which is less than 2.3 inches, and these are annual numbers. Now remember, there's not a lot of average rain in California, so we get around all this by moving water. But it's really important to realize the variability of the state, and again, people live where the water is not. I just read today that the highest recorded temperature in the United States was recorded today in the Mojave, and I believe it was 130 degrees. So you can see the difference in the weather between. You may notice a few stops and starts in this video. I'm having trouble with my equipment getting it to work properly. I apologize for that. You need to remember that Southern California never really has average rainfall. Other parts of California do, where they have consistent supplies of water every year, but we do not here. One year we'll get 36 inches of rain, and the next 3 years we'll get 2. And then we'll get 32 inches of rain. So it varies tremendously. On the right, you'll see an artist rendition of the city of Sacramento during a flood. That particular flood, which was around the 1910, if I'm not mistaken, it flooded so much in the Sacramento River that they were literally using canoes for 2 months to get to the second stories of buildings. The devastation was unbelievable, leading to a lot of the levees and dams being built. Rainfall for the region, oh wait, I gotta go back. So it's really the land of the freakish flood. There's a famous author named Carey McWilliams who wrote a book called Island on the Land about Southern California. He coined that phrase, the land of the freakish flood. You either have the dry or the flood. The rainfall for our region, though, if you looked at it on an average, if you plotted it and looked at an average, it would be between 15 and 18 inches a year. But we are so prone to drought. We have had perfect droughts 5 times since 1906. That's when everything conspires together to really make it difficult to get out of a drought. The last one was from 2012 to 2015. You may have thought it was longer. It sure felt longer to us where I work. It felt like it went on till about 2017. That's because it affected our groundwater basins. They're slow to react to drought, but they're also slow to refill. And El Nino and La Nina really don't have as much effect on precipitation as they get credit for. You can have terrible wet years, and it's a La Nina, which is supposed to be dry. You can have the reverse, and it's an El Nino. So I don't personally pay too much attention to that. The more we add population, the more we add pressure to our water supply. Now, the trend throughout the United States, and in particular California, is definitely on the downswing. That is totally true. We've added population without significantly adding water usage in per capita per day over the last 3 or 4 decades. But it doesn't mean eventually it's not going to go up. I would be remiss if I didn't bring up what is actually the definition of a drought, right? So most of the western states experience these extreme droughts at least 10% of the time. All of the West is in the same boat. And there's 2 different kinds. There's a physical drought and a regulatory drought. So a physical drought is when it doesn't rain, when we don't get any precipitation, we don't get any snow. Okay, that means that there's no water falling from the sky in whatever form. But a regulatory drought is when the courts enact laws that don't allow us to use the water that is stored, for example. That might be for an environmental reason. That's generally the most often used reason. The reason the last drought was so bad from 2012 to 2015, although it impacted us clear up until 2017, was because it was both. All right? We were working on a lack of precipitation, and we had new regulations that made it difficult to use the water that we had stored in case of drought. So that's pretty important to think about. I'm going to try and get this to work. This is the last drought, all right, that we had in California, and it shows it in a very brief synopsis. They use the U.S. drought monitors. So bear with me here. Please work. There we go. It looks like it might work. Maybe. I'm going to be quiet if it does. My internet's a little slow. I'm upgrading to higher speed Wi-Fi. Come on. Maybe there we have it. All right, here it is. It's on YouTube. I'm not going to try to enlarge it because I'll goof it up. I'm not going to talk over it either. It's loading. Sorry for the delay. You never know how these things are going to work. There it goes in 2011. You can see the color chart going from white, which is normal, to yellow, and so on. Exceptional is a deep, deep red color. We're in 2013 now. We're in 2014. Look at all the deep, deep red. 2015. 2016. And that's in January of 2017. In April of that year, the governor declared the drought over. We got more rain in March. Often March is Miracle March. So kind of an interesting perspective on it. So what is our actual supply? Well, we know precipitation varies, all right? And it varies. There's the average again, which we can't rely on, between 193 and 200 million acre feet. 1 acre foot is about 326,000 gallons. It gives you an idea of how much precipitation on average we get. 75% of the water is north of Sacramento, which is approximately in the middle of the state, and 80% of the demand is in the southern 2/3 of the state. Okay? So really, the least expensive and easiest way to save and supply new water is to conserve what we're wasting. The average person so wastes water, in particular outdoors. And in every place I've worked in Southern California, about 80% of our production in the summer goes for watering outside. It's not even used by people. So that's the easiest way for us to save water. Of the precipitation, normal is about 193 million acre feet. About 70 million of that runs off. Okay? It flows into either the Sacramento or San Joaquin rivers. They're by far the most important rivers. They're fed by many smaller rivers. And about 42% of that flows through the Delta, which we're going to examine the Delta a little bit closer. The Delta is a very important environmental area, but as the water flows through, the Delta wetlands actually clean the water and protect the water quality. About half is collected in 1,300 state and federal reservoirs, and we call that developed water, right? It's water that's available for us to use. The capacity is 44 million acre feet. So what happens to the rest of it? Well, a lot of it runs out to sea. And while some people, you might hear people who don't understand how water works say that that is wasted water, the reality is it isn't. First place, water belongs in the ocean. It's always going to go home to the ocean. But the second place is it feeds our extremely large commercial fishing industry. I believe I read one time that that is a $300 million a year industry. And unlike agriculture, fishing is primarily done by small family fisher people. Okay, it's not big agriculture. So I wouldn't necessarily think of it as wasted water. So of the developed water, the water that we take and we hold for use, 80% of that goes to agriculture and 20% of it is urban. That urban use can be classified in 4 ways: residential and everything else, which is lumped into commercial, industrial, and institutional, or CII, okay? Residential or CII. As a water conservation professional, residential water use is really the easiest to administer. CII, it's like wrangling cats. It's a little bit more difficult as a conservation person. So that's why you find that most conservation people really settle on urban users, residential users. So where does California get its water? Southern California. And this is a really nice map. We get it from natural supplies, right? Rainfall, which we store in aquifers. Snowfall, which we use in the summer months when it runs down the mountains. Then we have our own man-made rivers, like the LA Aqueduct, the California Aqueduct, which is part of the State Water Project, the Colorado River Aqueduct. Local supplies, right? That's our local groundwater basins typically. And conservation. That's where we get our water from. So wherever you work, if you're in California, it's probably going to be similar, okay, in Southern California. But wherever you work in the United States or in the world, it's either going to be natural or man-made, right? And conservation is always going to be an important factor. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch up with you later.